Welcome to the SBP Podcast Mobile Filmmaking. I'm your host, Susie Botello, and you are listening to episode 109.
Hey listeners, this is Jason C. Marshall, and I am back with the In the Weeds series, where we talk about story, formula, and structure. And here's your host, Susie Botello.
I want to say hello to my listeners. I missed them. It's been a couple of weeks. Guys, we've got our official new series. I keep saying that in every episode, but the last one, Jason, was the intro to everything. And now we're about to get nitty gritty, just in time for Halloween. Today, actually, we're recording this on International Podcasting Day.
Yes, I didn't even know that was a thing until I saw your post earlier.
Yeah, it's actually a thing, and it's actually been out since I think it was 2014. Someone introduced it as a hashtag, and it's become a big event. You know, it was like one of the trending hashtags on Twitter today. Not that all of our listeners are on Twitter, but it's become, you know, a major thing. So for all of you who are podcasters or all of you who have family in the podcasting business, happy International Belated Podcast Day. Jason, what are you going to be sharing with us in this session?
So today it's actually won't be too long, because we're going to talk about acts, which I don't have a lot to say on, but just a quick review as far as structure goes. We start big, and then we're gonna hone down. So acts, then beats, which we're gonna start deep diving into next time, and scenes. Just a quick review. But basically, one of the things we've talked about is that I work in a 4-act structure, not a 3-act structure.
So that's it. So we're gonna talk about acts, then we're going to introduce a little bit about beats and scenes, right?
Yeah, like just a very, very glossing over, because we're going to...
but what we're really going to grind on is the acts.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're riding 4 horses. I'm thinking a Lord of the Rings.
The 4 horsemen of the act apocalypse.
Yeah. Ooh, you're onto something there. Sounds like fun. Yeah, and so this is so if you're listening to this, you know, this is the cool thing. So if you download this episode, you can play it back as many times as you want to, and even, you know, write some notes. But as you know, Jason is also writing articles for each one of these things. So you'll also have that to go by. So you'll have your own cheat sheets?
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I post about this semi-regularly between my other stuff on my various socials, so I've kind of always got it out there.
Well, that's great. Hey, Jason, before we go into the acts and everything, which I know our listeners are really looking forward to, but do you have any updates on the other things that you're working on? Because you're working with the Nevers, right? The HBO Nevers. And
yes, so it is the premier fan site, hbonevers.com, where I'm primarily a staff writer, where they let me write about my theories and thoughts about the television show The Nevers, with a extreme amount of freedom to just do my thing, and I love it. I never planned to be a writer, or at least in that sense, pardon me, like articles and periodicals and things like that. And it just kind of happened, and now I'm writing for you too. So,
yeah, well, isn't it amazing how life, you know? But ride the momentum and take advantage of it. Everything leads to something, because everything is connected, and there's purpose to everything, even if we sometimes don't know what that purpose is. I'm sure some of you guys out there are probably going, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, Susie. And by the way, when I say guys, I mean everybody, you know, guys, girls, whatever. Hey, Jason, about acts.
yes.
Are we going to be talking about any specific acts in any films specifically?
For the purposes of today's discussion, we'll use Wonder Woman 2017 as the as the examples for when I talk about act breaks.
That's awesome. I love that movie.
It is.
And I know that we planned on using that one, and that's one of my favorites. So yay!
Very much. I have very, very fond feelings for that movie. All right. So before we kind of get into the weeds, I'm just going to talk very briefly about 3-act versus 4-act, because they're essentially the same thing. It's just the way we're saying it. In a conventional 3-act structure, you have Act 2 is split into 2 halves, 2A and 2B. For whatever reason, I don't understand. I also don't understand why there's this need to squeeze something into this arbitrary number. So, in a 3-act structure, Act 2 is separated into 2 halves by the midpoint. I go with the 4-act structure because
what is the midpoint?
So the midpoint is kind of the culmination of the first half of the movie, depending on which way you're going. In the case of Wonder Woman, it's when they have the fight in No Man's Land. Okay. And we'll come back to that. So the midpoint signifies a change in the character's journey. So that's why I look at it as 4 acts versus 3, because just 2A, 2B just bothers me. And it turns out I'm not alone on this. Larry Brooks, who writes books about story structure, has a very similar delineation. He breaks it down into percentages, 25, 50, 75, but it ends up being a 4-act system.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, sometimes I keep, confusing acts with scenes, but it's a completely different, well, it's not completely different. It's all tied up together.
Well, exactly.
But there are multiple scenes within one act.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're going to get into, over the course of this, is your act is your big sequence. Like that's a phase of their journey.
So it would be like the this, then that, then this.
Yeah, exactly.
Then that.
So yeah, like I said,
right.
So the way I break it down is the first act is the setup. This is where we meet. You meet the characters that you need to meet immediately and learn how his or her or their lives are, so you know what the before looks like. Act 2 is a reactive phase. So they've decided to take on the journey, and now they're in a new world, but they're reacting to it because everything that served them in their lives before doesn't work here. Then you have the midpoint, which, like I said, that's the culmination of everything in the first half. They've learned a bunch of lessons, so going into Act 3, it's an active phase. They can take on the world, as it were. And then the final act is the resolution act, where you have your climax. They've learned their lesson. They journey back home, whatever the case may be.
So in that whole section, before they feel like they can take over the world, right? They have to sort of prepare themselves, and at the same time they're preparing their audience so that it's believable that they can take care, that they're confident in somehow approaching
exactly.
That.
So think of it, reactive phase, like Act 2, the reactive phase is we watch them fail their way through the journey. Like they stumble, they fall, depending on the movie, dates go badly, or they mess up at work, whatever the case may be for an individual story. But the second act is...
Well, I think of films like, so I'm getting ahead of myself. Halloween month is coming. And I'm thinking about the scary movies, right? Where there's like naive teenagers, right? And they're very innocent, and they're very, like they don't know how to fight vampires and zombies or anything like that. But somehow they become heroes at the midpoint, right? And in order for that to be believable, a series of things has to sort of, within one night, usually, sort of prepare us to believe that. So they're sort of in training without being in training.
Yes.
They've accomplished this, and all of a sudden they got some skills that they didn't even know they had. things like that,
That's
right?
actually very apt. A very apt way to put it. I like that.
Oh, well, I'm
Yeah,
glad
it's
I'm
it's
being
it's
apt on the act.
it's very nice. It's their unofficial training day. I mean, really. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, nice,
it's true.
nice. I like that, Susie.
Okay, cool. All right, you heard it here first, guys, and that's it. That does it. No, I'm just
And
kidding.
we're done.
So because I interrupted
Mhm.
you, as far as that's concerned, so that's the four acts that you just
Yeah,
described, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And if you're selling if you're selling a screenplay to Hollywood, you just rename it Act 2A, 2B instead of 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Listen, it's the same thing. I like an even numbering system. It just works better for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, it's kind of like the scene 1A2, that kind of
Yes.
thing. I used to do script supervising and things like that. And you're trying to do this, making notes of everything on the script. And next thing you know, you're going, okay, so my left column here has so many of these cuts, but you have to note them all, you know?
Hmm. Yes.
Because everything is there on the film. And what you're really doing is taking notes for the editor. So yeah, I think it's more for the organizational
Hmm.
aspect of it than it is for a formula
Yeah.
type of a thing, right?
I mean, I do want to say this. Like, we're talking about acts, and they have their place, but I mean, it almost comes from the DNA of theater before
Mm-hmm.
motion pictures. And the fact is that if you follow
The one act
yeah,
play.
if you follow the beats, you don't really need to even think about acts. I mean, an act is basically an arbitrary delineation point in their journey. So I mean, you can actually kind of look at them fairly loosely, but it's more important to just understand what they are and why they exist.
Listeners, this is also kind of weird because basic or natural storytelling skills, right, sort of do take over. And what Jason is doing is giving you a breakdown so that you can really focus on what is happening to make it so that you have something concrete by the time you're through with the story, because you are filming it. You're not just standing in front of people and sharing a story.
Oh, exactly. And this is one of the things I want to say too is that it's you're right. I mean, when when you and I are talking before we start recording, you
Shush. No, I'm just kidding.
you'll tell me, we'll talk about what's happened since the last time we chatted, and when one of us is telling our stories, as it were, the natural progression is what we're used to in storytelling. It's just kind of there. But the whole point of this is to understand the elements that are there, so you know how to map them out to tell an effective story for the screen.
Exactly. Yeah, and we're not trying to so, for some people they're going, God, this is overwhelming. This can be really confusing. But what happens is filmmaking in itself can get very confusing. If you've ever had to prepare a shot list, for example, a shot list is not in sequence of the story. It's in sequence of the locations, that you're filming in, right? Because you're going to film, part of scene 1 in this location, right? And then you're also filming the end scene, at this same location. So you do a wardrobe change and all these things as long as 10 years haven't gone by. And then you continue that. And so your shot list has to do that. What is our shot list for today, right? On the call sheets. And it'll have on there, it'll tell you, you're going to have, this scene, this part of this scene and this other one and this other one. And they'll tell you the script, the numbers of the pages on the screenplay, on the script, so that you'll know how to follow this. Because if you think about it, it can become so confusing. And next thing you know, you go, okay, here's everything. Here's all the footage. You've done your production. And then the editor goes, okay, so it says here on the screenplay that somebody gets shot here. Where is that footage? oh, you know what? That was supposed to happen at the lake, and we forgot to shoot that there on day 3.
Oops.
So yeah. So there are things like that happen. So what Jason is doing is breaking this down in a way that, and it'll become secondhand for you, kind of like it is for him. You know what I'm saying? As he's sharing this with you, it'll become secondhand for you. And as you do it more and more, and you're making more films, man, you are just gonna rock the films that you make, and you're gonna see your name. You're gonna be at the Academy Awards, because your film has such a captivating story. And these are the things that when critics, when reviewers are reviewing films and things like that, like on IMDb and so forth, these are the things they're making notes on. These are the things they're criticizing. They're not going, well, this transition was a little poor, or anything like that. They're really talking about, they're reviewing the story and the film along with all the other aspects of it. But this is a real major important part. So anyway, I'm selling you.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And that's the other thing too. I mean, I guess the secondary purpose of this is that because there's always going to be people who push back against, I don't like structure, I don't like formula, I don't want to make a garbage formula movie. Which, let's face it, formula's freedom.
Yeah, it's like math. Yeah. I don't want to break this all down.
Formula's freedom. And the whole point of this is that old axiom, you need to understand the rules before you can break them. So our whole purpose, our whole purpose here is to break it all down, explain it, use examples so that you can watch a movie and see where all the pieces go, so that when you write your own, if you want to change,
you can break all the
rules. But you
need
to understand why the rule. I say quote unquote rules. I mean, like I said, it's just people have been trained to watch movies a certain way, so you need to understand that to mix it up
and to know that. Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's go back. Let's go back to, I feel like I totally interrupted you on that, but let's go back because look, guys, so Jason and I haven't mentioned this in the podcast before, but Jason is basically giving you, so as you're listening to this podcast, if you've been listening to the podcast with all the different filmmakers that come on the show, one of the things that we always end up talking about is story, and how important that is. And I really dwell on that a lot because it's my thing. I really value the storytelling part of all of this because in the end, story is what it's all about. You are sharing stories. Most film directors and filmmakers are storytellers. It's one of the reasons for making films. Not everything is like that. But I think it's really important because I've been trying to inspire you, right, to make movies and share your stories and all of that. And so I'm giving you the reasons as to why you should, why it's important, and why it's important to take control of your story and make films. But what this series, this In the Weeds series, with Jason's contribution, what this is doing is Jason is giving you the how. I'm telling you why you should make a movie, and share your story, why that's important and how empowering that is. But Jason is showing you how to grab that power, how to control it, and how to make the best of it, and how to make awesome films. So that's it. And now back to Jason.
You're building me up quite a bit. I better not screw this up. So as I said, we kind of went over the various acts and the things that are involved in them. So I think we can go ahead and get into a little bit of example of how the act structure works. And as you said, for that we're going to use Wonder Woman, one of my favorite movies, awesome. One of your favorite movies. It's a fantastic movie. Go watch it. So as I said, the first act is all about setup. So in Wonder Woman, we meet Diana in today's world, and then we get a dissolve, and we meet young Diana. So we learn about her time growing up in Themyscira. We learn the mythology. We kind of learn who she is. And then, Chris Pine shows up and crashes plane in the ocean. And he tells them all about the Great War. And she has to make a decision of whether to go help him or stay and ignore the problems of man. And that is essentially Act 1 in a nutshell. Act 2, the reactive phase, which is, you're stepping into a new world. So a change of location is very often a thing that happens there. So they get on the little boat and they leave. And then, we end up in London. There's some funny stuff where she's trying on dresses. She meets all the generals and sees how badly they treat soldiers. And all sorts of little moments there, little character building stuff. We start the B story, which is the romance between her and Steve Trevor, which is done so beautifully because it's done with just a look. It's when he shows up in the store and she's tried on that last dress, and it's just they hold the shot on him, and it's so subtle. I love it.
Yeah.
And then of course they build the team. They go meet. I apologize, I can't remember their names. There's the shorter guy who speaks multiple languages. Samir. His name is Samir. And Charlie, their sharpshooter. And then later on, they had to go a little ways, and they meet the chief. So they built the team, and they got to go. We got to go get to the front by this time. And that's Act 2. We've established we've got a secondary team. We've got the main characters. We established the B story. She's failed at some stuff and learned some lessons. And then we get to the midpoint, which is your break into Act 3. And the midpoint, as I said, I love it so much. There's so many things I love about this movie, Susie. Because it's very well named, because the whole purpose is, we're going to get deeper into this, but her whole dilemma is wanting to help people, and the team's like, no, we got to get to the front, and she's like, no, you know what, that's what you're going to do. I'm going to help these people.
Yeah, because she's sympathizing with everybody.
Exactly.
And that's one of the reasons why they introduce you to her as a child.
Yes.
And all the reasons why she comes from that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, so he's like, that's no man's land. No man can cross that. She's like, you're right. No man can cross that. I don't know why I said it that way.
I'm all like,
And so she has learned a bunch of stuff in Act 2, which, like I said, we didn't get into now because we're going to deep dive into that after. And she takes the fight, and this is the interesting thing about the midpoint. It's either a false victory or a false defeat, depending on how your Act 3 goes. Because
now for the viewer, this is like, unless they're looking at the clock and know how long the movie is, right? They may think like, oh, here we go. This is it. This is the big moment and the end of the movie, like when they win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but no, this is where you get that action right in the middle, and then it kind of calms down again before you get to your climax. But yeah, if you're just along for the ride, you're like, yeah, things are happening. So you get into Act 3, the reactive phase of the journey, where she's like, we're taking the fight to the bad guy. We are doing this. We're all in. And part of Act 3 is where you have a moment or two, depending on your story, where all is lost. And this is where it circles back to the midpoint. So in Wonder Woman, they save the village. They beat the Germans. They cross no man lands. They save the people in the village, the ones she wanted to help. But then, 20 minutes later.
Well, see, and that's where I thought, when I was watching the film the first time, because I think I've seen it at least twice, that's where I thought, okay, this is the end. Now they've saved the village, and now they make it through their thing and it's over with. But no, it's almost like that was just half the movie.
Oh, exactly. So yeah, so
And I didn't realize that as a viewer.
I know and again, when you start to see all the pieces come together, you're like, whoa, this is so cool.
Because you get comfortable.
Yes. Yep. But yeah, so they saved the village at the midpoint, but at the all is lost, everyone in the village is killed anyway because the bad guy launched a bomb into it, like a gas bomb.
Yep.
Which plays into her character arc, which is another thing we're going to be talking about later, of she has to learn a lesson, and jumping ahead, that lesson is there isn't necessarily good or bad, there's shades of gray. That's her lesson. But she has a moment where she has to be like, no, I'm done with this. You guys are terrible. Deal with this on your own. And that's that point where the efforts she made to save people earlier were in vain. And that's how these beats we're going to talk about later, you connect them to each other to not just tell a compelling story, like a cohesive story, but a compelling story. Okay. So,
Yeah.
So she has this moment, but then the team sends a signal. So she's like, no, okay, you know what? I'm going to go after the bad guy. I mean, screw all you guys. I'm still doing this mission I've assigned myself. Then we're into the final act, which is the resolution act. And it starts before the climax. In this case, she meets Ares, the bad guy, who basically lays out his evil plan. You know, it's like Poirot or Murder, She Wrote or a contemporary version, because I just dated myself, where, you know, they get everyone in the room with the bad guy, you know, like, here's my theory, and the bad guy's like, no, you're wrong. I did it this way. So she learns what his plan is, and then she's like, no, I can't let you do that. So she fights him. She learns her ultimate lesson. That's the character arc element. And then, you know, there's a resolution. And then we come back to today to bookend the movie. We start in present day and end in present day, where she basically wraps up the theme of the movie.
And that's the fifth act. I'm just kidding.
Look, there are arguments for 5-act movies. I haven't looked into it, but I know one of the Indiana Jones movies, I've seen a lot of chatter about one of them being a 5-act movie.
I was only kidding, but wow, you never know.
But
huh?
I mean, well, really, I mean, do as many as you need to do to tell a good story. And this is where, like I said, when you and I talk rules, we're using the word rules very loosely.
Yes.
Because it's not a set in stone rule, but it's kind of the best word to describe the pieces that make a properly structured story.
I mean, look, this is a podcast about making movies with your cell phones, basically. So, yeah, I hope anybody who listens to this doesn't say, oh, they're talking about making, these hard rules, or something. It's like, no.
No, you can, you can mix, you can remix, you can even take a few things out. You just can't take too many things out or move too many things around, because then the audience can't.
That's the genius. Yeah. That's the genius. Once you get, see, this is the cool thing about this. Once you're doing this off and on, well, I shouldn't say off and on, but enough times, it becomes secondhand to you, to where now you can really get creative. It's like learning how to make spaghetti, right? The spaghetti sauce, you know, and, you may throw a little too much oregano or a little too much, this. I like to add wine to my sauce, just a little tidbit there. But when you're doing things, once you've got your basic down secondhand, you can start experimenting a little bit and seeing if it works. And you're doing all this before production, which is the great part, you know, because if you're doing this all before production, this is not costing you much of anything. This is just all you and your crew, like Jason was saying. I think it was like in the first one that we did together in episode 107, where it's sometimes good to run it through with different people, with the people involved. But at least you have the basics down. You can play with it. You can become this genius storyteller, and everybody will review your movie and go, he did this thing. I would call it like a fifth act, the fifth element.
Actually, just come back to what you just said about that. One of the things I very often recommend is once you have a script done, do a table read. Get some actors together or some friends just to hear other people say the words you've been kind of mired in for days, weeks, months, whatever. So you can hear them spoken and be like, oh, I need to change that. It doesn't flow well or it doesn't sound natural. The value in that is incalculable.
Wow. Okay, cool. All right, so you were going on into the fifth act and all that, but I don't want to stray too much, and I'm the one that's doing that to you guys, so sorry.
I know, Susie, come on, keep it on track. But no, it's like I said, it's there are cases where that can apply. I can't list any off the top of my head, but just know that there's a lot more flexibility in this whole process. And once you understand the pieces, your scripts are going to take off like a rocket ship.
Okay. So, now that we're done with the fifth element and the 4 acts, do you want to get into the beats?
Very, very quickly. And this will be once again just review from the previous episodes, because next time we're going to start getting into these guys heavy. And we'll do them one at a time, just so as not to overwhelm. So when I say an act is a phase, so Act 1 is the setup phase, Act 2 is the reactive phase, Act 3 is the active phase, and Act 4 is the resolution phase. You can also call an act a sequence, because once you add beats and scenes, it becomes more of a sequence, and you can kind of look at it by itself. So in the setup act, there's 4 beats. There's the prologue, which is essentially your introduction. The normal world, where we see the character or characters' lives as they exist right now. Then there's a disruption, something that forces them to change or gives them the option to change, whatever the case may be. And discord, because they need to decide, am I going to do this thing? Am I going to take this journey? Am I going to do whatever?
This so fits into the acts better than I've ever understood it before.
Yeah, oh, good. I'm glad, because once I got my head around it, I'm like, this is fantastic. I get it now.
So now everybody knows why I'm doing these podcasts, right? I'm the student.
Well,
I do learn a lot. This is great.
Yeah, but you're also the teacher too, because you're learning, but at the same time,
they do say that, and this is probably true. I used to hate math, right? But whenever I'd go and try and teach something to somebody regarding math, all of a sudden I became the, because
this thing I'm talking about, I know it. I'm confident enough about it to share it. So this is one place where I deviate from kind of the Save the Cat beats. In Act 1, they have a specific beat for theme stated. But here is my view on that. When you're writing your story, you generally have a message you want to share. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you find it through the writing process. But because a film is art, it's interpretive, and the audience will get different messages, and sometimes not even close to the message you intend. So somewhere in the first act, you want to establish your central theme, but you don't necessarily have to have a specific beat where a character says to the main character, here's the theme of the movie. So just right. Somewhere in the first act, set up the message you want to share, and the audience will either get the message you're sharing, or they will find a completely different message, because their interpretation will be based completely on their own life experiences.
Now that makes sense. Yes.
And coming back to Wonder Woman, there's thematically, it's a rich movie. There's several things, several messages going on at once. But she wraps up the theme in the climax where she's basically, love or hate, I choose love. And so this, that's 95% of the way through the movie when she wraps up the theme. But there's so many other things going on that you can thematically, it's just so rich thematically. Okay, so yeah, that's one of my big deviations from Save the Cat is I don't have a theme stated beat. I just believe that it needs to be established somewhere in dialogue in the first act. Then you get into Act 2, the reactive phase, and you have I call it Enter the Matrix because it seems quite apt to walking into a new world. And that's where they've made the decision to go on the journey. And then the bulk of Act 2 is the upside down world where they're experiencing all these new things. Old ways of life don't serve them well. If it's a comedy, this is where a lot of the funny happens. And this is also in this act, you want to introduce the B story. Now, same thing. I don't have a beat for this because you've got a lot of freedom and you've got 25% of a movie to play around in Act 2. So, I mean, does it need a B story beat? I don't think so. I think, once again, like Wonder Woman, you can do it in such a subtle way because it's showing, not telling, Susie. And like I said, and once again, just that one shot of Chris Pine in awe of Diana says more than pages of dialogue could ever say.
Yeah, and that's what I love about film.
Mm-hmm. It's so wonderful. Act 3, as I said, the start of Act 3, end of Act 2, start of Act 3 is the midpoint. That's your big set piece in the middle of a movie. It's a win, it's a loss, but whatever it is, whatever one of those two it is, it propels the story ahead in Act 3. Because if they win, they need to lose something for an all-is-lost moment. If they lose, they need to take that lesson and use it to propel them, even stronger toward their plot goal. Then you raise...
Sounds okay. So, all right. So, I think I lost myself a little bit here. So, on the beats, right? So, you've got Act 1, 2, 3, 4. Forget the fifth. That was just a joke. And and then you go into these beats, and we were talking about. Now, is there a specific number of beats that you should have? You can have as many beats as you want, right?
I believe Save the Cat uses 15. I use 12. KM Weiland. I think she falls somewhere in between with her mapping. I believe she's more of a novelist, but the same rules apply. Daniel Calavisi in his story maps uses 8. So there's a number of variation. And like I said, let me take a look. Larry Brooks in his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like it's a little hard to read, but yeah, he uses several. So there, because that's the thing. Sometimes you can bundle beats together.
Okay.
But so I use the 12 just because for me it works the most effectively as kind of a stripped down but still provides enough depth for my story mapping.
Right. Okay. And this I mean, as far as the story goes, right? The flow of the story, does it hurt it a lot if you have too many beats, or does it hurt it a lot if you have too few beats? I mean, I guess what could happen is that your audience doesn't get what's happening, right? Or they're understanding more than, you know what I mean? Like they're bored with it if you have too many.
I've never seen a case where anyone has had more than the 15 that Blake has laid out to Save the Cat. I've seen what I tend to see more often is fewer beats. And
because if you have too many, then people are getting too much and they're bored with it. Like they've got it all figured out.
yeah, exactly. Basically. Yeah, because you need to build some mystery regardless of the story, because you have to.
Right.
You can't know that the character is going to achieve their plot goal, because then what's the fun?
Right.
So you need they need to have trials to go through and things to learn along the way. But yeah, I think
see, I'm actually learning. This is great. And if I'm learning, I'm sure you guys, our listeners, are learning too.
Well, that's what we want, right?
And yeah, and the thing about it too is like it's kind of like when you learn like riding a bike, right? Once you've got those, your dad's done holding, or whoever holding the thing for you. You just want to get okay, let it go. Let me go now. Let me get rolling. Yep. I can pedal now on two wheels. I'm good to go, and I just can't wait to get started and hit town with it.
Oh, exactly.
So.
Yeah. So sorry to back up in case I jumped ahead on you. So you've got 4 beats in Act 1, plus setting up your theme, which isn't a beat. That's just, we'll call that a moment. Somewhere in there you do that. In Act 2, you essentially have the 2 beats, which is the choice to enter Act 2. The call to adventure. And then I call it the upside down world, because that's literally what it is. It's a upside down version of what the characters are familiar with. So you got the 2 beats, and the moment is you need to introduce the B story somewhere in there.
And that's in Act 1.
That's in Act 2.
Or Act 2. Wait.
So Act 1 has 4 beats.
Okay, got it.
Act 2.
That's
Act
right.
2 has the 2. Act 3 has 3 beats, one of them being the midpoint, which we just talked about. Then raising the stakes, because you got to keep moving the story forward. And then the Valley of Despair, which is that moment where they're down, all is lost. Everything is terrible. How am I going to recover from this? Then they dig deep to carry on. Act 4, I have 3 beats. Revelations, that's where they kind of learn a lesson that they need for the next beat, which is the climax. Because the climax isn't always a fight. I mean, sometimes it's just words. Once again, depending on your story. And then the epilogue, which is your bookend to the prologue, just to wrap up the story. That, hey, here's where they were, here's where they are now. They're better off, they're a better person, etc.
That's great, Jason. So now that we've gone through all the acts and all the beats, what can our listeners expect for the next episode?
So we're gonna go
or session.
Session. We're gonna go through the acts, the acts. We're gonna go through the beats individually. So we're gonna take each one. We're gonna talk about what should be there. Then we're going to use the movies we've discussed as an example.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because the idea is that we're going to talk about it, but here's a real world example, so you can see what we're talking about, so that it just ties the whole thing together. So it's not an abstract concept.
Jason, what updates do you have that you may want to share before we wrap this up?
Actually, not much. This has kind of been my primary thing recently. Julian and myself recorded a couple more movie reviews. We did Suicide Squad and Reminiscence, but I haven't finished cutting them together because I haven't. So those will be up at some point. Honestly, the truth is I made a mistake. The first time we recorded it, we just sat in the car and exited the movie and talked about it. It was a lot of fun. We tried to do a different setup with 2 cameras. We actually tried 3 cameras. But something is missing. It's just not as fun as it was. So I'm kind of taking a moment to reassess how to do that moving forward. Because that's the thing. Sometimes.
When you're saying cameras, you're talking about
phones.
Smartphone cameras?
Yes. Pardon me. Because not everyone knows me. I don't have a DSLR. I don't have a video camera. I do everything on my phone. Phones.
Nice.
Because I've never gotten rid of any old ones, so I've got a handful of them here.
I keep watching more and more movies, not coming back to, like 10, 12 years ago or whatever. I keep seeing more movies where somebody brings up, do you have a video camera I can borrow because I want to blah, blah, blah. And some other character says, are you kidding? You've got the best camera on your phone right now. What do you need a video camera? I mean, I'm loving it, because
Oh yeah, no, it's great.
back in the day.
My God, just the freedom. Because and this is completely off to the side, but I love that during the day, if I see something, I can just pull up my phone and photo or video record it, and not have to think about it. Just like, hey, there's something cool, snap. Anyway, coming back to other things, you've kind of got me set up on podcast now, which I never planned on. And now that we're 3 in, I'm hoping with my work on HBO The Nevers, I may appear on 1 or 2 of their podcasts. Right now, because of the break with The Nevers, they're reviewing Firefly. And I reached out to Matthew, who runs the whole thing, and said, I would like to be on the Serenity episode, because that's one of the movies you and I are going to be talking about. And because I'm so well versed in it, and it was kind of the movie that really showed me what sci-fi could be outside of Star Trek. I was like, I would really like to get involved in this particular episode, which is still they're halfway through Firefly, so it's still several weeks away, but I'm hoping to make an appearance on their podcast as well.
Well, that's really cool, because now you're becoming a podcast pro.
I know, right?
I mean, like, you're practically co-hosting this. I mean, you are. I mean, one of the things, in the weeds, I think the title kind of speaks for itself, because we're getting in the weeds of something that's really benefiting everyone out there who's listening. And look, I'm going to be really honest with you. Whether you're using a camera, or you, meaning, like a traditional camera, or whether you're using your phone, storytelling as a part of, learning how to tell really great stories through films, while you're making films, is actually a big asset for your career in film. It's the part that makes or breaks somebody. Once you've learned all the little details of filmmaking, what lenses, what buttons to push, what settings to have, what's better here, what's better there, get your gimbals, or get your crew together, all these things, now you're getting into it. And the thing is, like, you're not the only person out there making films. And if you're submitting to film festivals, and things like that, you want people to rave about that film you made.
Oh, yes.
Right, Mark? You want people to go, my God, that was so good. You know why I want you to do that? Because by doing that, you could change the world, and you can inspire people to tell great stories and change the world. I'm not saying the world is crappy, but there are a lot of bad things in it. The world will always have things that need changing.
Yeah, that's true.
For the better. So being able to do that, there really is no better time, to realize that maybe part of the reason why you're here is because you're made to change the world a little bit, and do your part.
Well,
right, Jason?
Well, absolutely. It's that whole thing is that, okay, I want to get on my soapbox for a minute as we wrap up. And it is this. If you're going to be making movies, especially outside of the studio system or outside of having a budget at all, you have to do it because you love it. And you can't necessarily care about how many people you reach. I think your goal should be to reach one person. Because if you can impact one person, you can potentially change that person's life. But if you're
that is good.
But
that's exactly.
But if you're doing it for awards and accolades and love, it's a zero-sum game because you can't please everyone, and in trying to please everyone, you'll please no one, and you'd be like a snake eating its own tail. You're never going to get the results you want. So you have to do.
It's true.
It has to be personal, and you have to love it, and that's all I have to say about that.
But here's where you're talking to founder of the film festival. But here's where the awards come in. We all need a little bit validity, even if it's just for ourselves sometimes. And I think it's always nice when somebody says out in public, "Hey, good job, man. You did a great job on that."
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what the award comes in.
Oh, yeah. So don't misunderstand. Getting an award is wonderful. Getting external validation is wonderful. Getting the validation of your peers is wonderful. I'm just saying, if your only goal is awards, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, of course. Because I mean, that's not why you do anything you do. Not because you're going to gain, some material thing out of it. Like you don't go and help out your friend at 3:00 in the morning, right?
And keep
crying on the phone or something,
and keep score. Like, hey, remember that time that I did that thing for you? It's time to ante up. No.
And you're not doing that because next week is your friend's birthday and you want an extra piece of cake. You're not doing that for that reason. You're doing it because you want to help out your friend. And you just jump on it.
Well, exactly. That's what this is all about. It's like, okay, I've gained this knowledge. Now it's time to share it. And then you've given me a platform for it, and I appreciate that to no end.
Yeah, I sometimes forget about that. Like that's a great example. I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm going to share that because, I'm not doing this podcast. I mean, I'm surprised we're here. You're episode 109.
Yep, that's 3 in a row.
Geez. Well, I remember when I first started this, one of the rules was one of the myths or whatever you want to call it, right? The things that people say about podcasters is like, oh, if you record 6 episodes, then you're doing great, because most people stop after 6 episodes. And here I am, and I thought, well, I just got to get to the 6th episode, but I didn't go into this to just do 6 episodes, so to see if I put a lot of work and research into this, and I already was friendly with the community of mobile filmmaking. So in some ways you could say, there was something I saw today, the International Podcast Day thing. Somebody said something which I thought was really interesting about actually, you know who it was? It was our friend Ant Pruitt.
Okay.
And he had a quote, and he said, and he listens to this podcast, so hey, Ant.
Hey, Ant.
So he said, basically, and I can't read the quote right now, but basically how interesting it is to have, you're a podcaster, and your listeners become your community. And I was thinking, wow, that's freaking awesome. That's a great point to make and everything. But I feel like I cheated, because for me, the community was already there for me. I already knew so many people in the mobile filmmaking community.
Okay.
And that was the purpose for doing the podcast, because I wanted to give them a voice. I wanted to create this other platform to give them a voice.
Right.
Other than having them, because not everybody could come to the film festival as well. So part of the research I had to do wasn't like, how do I record a podcast? It was more like, how do I record a podcast with people who are in other parts of the world while I'm in San Diego, and give them a voice, and that was so it's kind of like flipping it. So in a way, it felt like I was cheating, because I didn't have to develop like some big community from the podcast. It was that community.
Pull together.
Yeah, it was already there, and I was already having so many conversations with everybody, Jason. Kind of like, conversation you and I had, but we had it after the podcast. And I mean, after I started the podcast, and with all these other people, it was like, hey, I'm going to have a podcast. I'm creating this podcast. come and be a guest on the podcast because we're having these great conversations anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And I just took everybody all the way around the scenic drive of podcasting, I guess. So hey guys, by the way, we're here for you. You know, in the notes we're gonna share links on social media. Give us a follow. Shout outs are always welcome and we give them back.
Absolutely.
Share your projects, questions, whatever you have. We're open to it. And reach out to Jason to ask him questions. He's very practically an angel here right now, just volunteering all his knowledge for you. And very gracious for that, Jason. Thank you very much for being on the show. You want to say goodbye to our listeners?
Yes, thank you for having me, as always. And thanks, everyone, for listening. It's been an interesting journey for me, and I've been listening to Susie for years now. I was going to say months. It's been years. It's a good thing she's doing, but I guess I'm speaking to the choir because people who are listening want to listen to you.
I think they're here for you.
Well,
too,
yeah, there's that. But yeah, as Susie said, hit us up on, you got questions, need clarification, hit us up on social. She'll have all the links. I'll have links when I do the accompanying article. And I'm actually more active on Instagram than Twitter, but I do keep an eye on my Twitter feed, so I'm just slower to reply over there.